Have you ever heard of a king who abandoned his capital city not once but twice? A ruler whose greatest admiral, a national hero, was someone he personally wanted to execute? Today, we're diving into the tumultuous and controversial reign of Seonjo, the 14th king of Joseon. His story is a whirlwind of political drama, devastating invasions, and decisions that are still debated by historians hundreds of years later. Was he a tragic figure caught in impossible circumstances, or was he one of the most incompetent kings in Korean history? Let's find out. Before he was King Seonjo, he was Prince Joseon. He wasn't even in the direct line of succession. The previous king, Myeongjong, died without an heir, and so the royal court had to look elsewhere. In 1567, the 15-year-old Prince Joseon was chosen, becoming the first king of Joseon who was not the son of the previous monarch. His ascension was seen as a fresh start. He was known for being bright and dedicated to Confucian principles. He gathered brilliant scholars, known as the Sarim, to reform the government which had been plagued by corruption. For the first 2 decades, things seemed promising. It looked like Seonjo was on track to become one of Joseon's great kings, but beneath the surface, political divisions were deepening, and across the sea, a storm was brewing that would change everything. The scholars Seonjo had empowered soon split into rival factions, most notably the Easterners and the Westerners. Their squabbles started over small matters but quickly escalated into a bitter power struggle. The court became a viper's nest of accusations and purges. While the politicians were busy fighting each other, they neglected the nation's defenses. Suggestions to strengthen the military were dismissed. The prevailing belief was that peace had lasted for 200 years. So why worry? This infighting and complacency created the perfect storm for the disaster that was about to strike. The Japanese invasions of Korea, also known as the Imjin War. In 1592, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the unifier of Japan, set his sights on conquering Ming China, and Korea was the unfortunate land bridge in his way. He demanded passage, and when Joseon refused, he unleashed a massive, battle-hardened army of over 150,000 samurai. The Japanese forces were armed with advanced muskets, the arquebus, while the Joseon army was unprepared and poorly equipped. The southern city of Busan fell in a matter of hours. The Japanese advance was terrifyingly swift. One commander, Konishi Yukinaga, and his rival, Kato Kiyomasa, even had a race to see who could capture the capital, Hanseong, modern-day Seoul, first. Faced with the unstoppable Japanese advance, King Seonjo made a decision that would tarnish his reputation forever. He fled. He abandoned his capital and his people, racing north towards the border with Ming China. The citizens of Hanseong felt utterly betrayed. In their fury, they burned the palace and the government buildings, including the slave registries, which freed many people in the chaos. Seonjo's flight was seen as the ultimate act of cowardice. While a king's survival could be argued as necessary for the state's continuity, the public saw a leader who ran while his people were left to face the brutal invaders alone. As Seonjo fled, a hero emerged from the waves, Admiral Yi Sun-sin. While the Joseon land forces were collapsing, Yi Sun-sin and the Joseon Navy were achieving impossible victories at sea. Using his brilliant tactics and the legendary turtle ships, he crippled Japanese supply lines, which was crucial in slowing down their advance. You would think the king would be grateful, right? Well, the reality was far more complicated. Seonjo grew intensely jealous and suspicious of Yi's growing fame and influence. The king, who was hiding near the border, was being overshadowed by a military commander who was actually fighting and winning. The court factions exploited this jealousy. Yi's rivals spread rumors and false reports, painting him as insubordinate. Seonjo, already insecure, fell for it. He had Yi Sun-sin arrested, stripped of his rank, and tortured. He was on the verge of executing his most capable admiral. It was only due to the fierce intervention of some loyal officials that Yi's sentence was reduced to serving as a common foot soldier. It was a shocking and self-destructive decision, driven by pure ego and paranoia. With Yi gone, the Japanese Navy regrouped, sensing their chance. In Yi Sun-sin's place, Seonjo appointed an admiral named Won Gyun, a man known for his incompetence and rivalry with Yi. The result was catastrophic. At the Battle of Chilcholyang, Won Gyun led the entire Joseon fleet into a Japanese ambush. The navy that Yi had painstakingly built was almost completely annihilated. Only 13 ships survived the disaster. With the Joseon Navy gone, the Japanese forces could be resupplied and were free to advance on land once again. The situation was desperate. Panicked, the court had no choice. They had to reinstate Yi Sun-sin. When Admiral Yi was restored to his command, he was given the remnants of the fleet, just 13 ships. The court, including Seonjo, thought the situation was hopeless and suggested he abandon the navy and join the ground forces. Yi's response is now legendary. He famously wrote, "I still have 13 ships. As long as I am alive, the enemy will not dare to look down on us." What followed was the legendary Battle of Myeongyang. With just 13 ships, Yi Sun-sin faced a Japanese fleet of over 300. Using his knowledge of the treacherous currents and his sheer tactical genius, he achieved one of the most miraculous victories in naval history, sinking dozens of enemy ships without losing a single one of his own. He saved Joseon again. After 6 long years of brutal warfare and failed negotiations, the war finally ended in 1598 with the death of Toyotomi Hideyoshi. But the damage to Joseon was immense. The land was devastated, countless lives were lost, and cultural treasures were destroyed. You'd hope that King Seonjo would have learned something from the ordeal, but his paranoia and insecurity only seemed to worsen. In the final, tragic chapter of the war, Admiral Yi Sun-sin was killed in the Battle of Noryang. Even in death, Seonjo's jealousy lingered. He was slow to grant Yi posthumous honors, and his initial rewards were insultingly minor for a man who had saved the kingdom multiple times. So, how do we judge King Seonjo? On one hand, he faced an unprecedented national crisis that few rulers could have handled perfectly. He did successfully secure aid from Ming China, which was crucial in eventually repelling the Japanese. But on the other hand, his legacy is dominated by his personal failings. His flight from the capital, his crippling insecurity, and his appalling treatment of Yi Sun-sin, the nation's greatest hero. He allowed political infighting to weaken the country and then abandoned his people when the consequences arrived. Most historians agree that while the circumstances were difficult, Seonjo's poor leadership and deep character flaws made a terrible situation even worse. His reign stands as a cautionary tale about how a ruler's personal insecurities can bring a nation to its knees. What do you think? Was Seonjo a weak king who failed his people, or a tragic figure overwhelmed by events beyond his control? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into Korean history. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories from the past. See you next time.